Thanks. That was actually staged to get people to pay attention to me coming up here. I'm John Athley. I'm the chair of the Stage Manager Association for this year. And thank you. On behalf of the board of the SMA, we'd like to welcome you all to our 25th anniversary celebration. I was writing down some notes, and I started to think about my very first meeting when I sat down to an SMA meeting a number of years ago, not quite 25, closer to 20. But I sat in that room, and I looked at the people speaking and the stage managers and the founding members, and I was filled with just a sense of awe and admiration and respect, and I was just like, wow. And it's actually very thrilling right now to be in the same room with the same people and still be filled with that sense of awe and admiration and just full of thanks for everything they accomplished and achieved over the last 25 years and everything that they started in those early meetings 25 years ago. We're also joined tonight by two very special guests. One of them, Bob Brewer, who is the first ombudsman from Equity. And a lifetime member of the SMA. Bob was one of the first people responsible for taking care of us stage managers at Equity. A job he did very well and with warmth and excitement. And I always cherish the time I spent with Bob, just talking everything theater, stage management, anything. He was always there. He made time for us, and he took care of us in ways that we'll never forget and we will always appreciate. We're also joined tonight by Alan Eisner. The SMA and Alan share a very special bond in that when the SMA founding members were starting to meet and talk about stage management, Alan Eisenberg walked through the doors of Actors Equity for the first time 25 years ago and began a historic 25-year era as the executive director of Equity, where he oversaw the growth of stage managers and their voice and their representation on council, and has protected us and taken care of us in many incredible ways. And I've had the privilege to work with him on a number of occasions and to watch him negotiate. And it's quite thrilling to watch him negotiate the best deal for all working members. And it's a great honor to have him here with us tonight as we celebrate. I'm not going to really speak long because it's all about what we did for 25 years. And many other speakers who've been here will come up and tell us, explain the history of the organization. But I do want to take a moment and pay a brief tribute to a wonderful man, somebody I'd worked with on 2 shows, Patrick Quinn, who was a great friend to all stage managers and somebody that was respected what we did and understood what we did and always stood up for us, even when it meant that he might be sticking his neck out for us. Tributes have been coming through for the last 2 days, and they will continue to come through for a long time. One of those tributes was handed to me by one of our founding members, Jane Neufeld, and it's a short story that exemplifies Patrick and his relationship to stage managers, and. In the mid-'80s, in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, a few counselors, 3 actors and 2 stage managers, got together one night in Patrick's apartment. And at the end of the evening, they decided, what can we do? And they said, well, let's put on a show. Let's raise money and awareness. Thus came to be, in November of 1985, the show called The Best of the Best. Cued at 6 a.m. the morning of the show, Patrick and 4 other counselors looking through the glass front doors of the Metropolitan Opera House as 30-plus SMA members headed for the Met's stage door and their volunteer assignments for the day. Stage managers found themselves shepherding star performers from limos to backstage dressing rooms, from dressing rooms to stage, manning the green room refreshments, you name it. Those magnificent SMA stage managers were right there on top of it all. Patrick, during that evening, said something that sums up what it is at the heart of why we have such pride and dignity about what a stage manager is and does. He said, as always, right there, making it happen, the stage managers. I would like to take a moment now of silence just to remember Patrick and to keep Marty and his family in our thoughts. And if you haven't heard, tomorrow 8 o'clock they are dimming the lights on Broadway in Patrick's honor. Now, what we should do is let's go back to the beginning and have people that were there talk to us about it. So I'm going to ask Jane Neufeld and Bob Bennett to come up here and regale us with remembrances of the early years. Jane and Bob.
Early years, that sounds so long ago. Oh, hey, did you go all the way up that stair? Earlier this afternoon, Jane and I were talking, and I said, "Do I have to wear a tie tonight?" And she said, "At your age, you should wear a tie tonight." But I found this shirt, so I didn't have to wear a tie. It's wonderful when I was down there and I could see you all. To see so many people who I have not seen in quite a long time. And it just reminds me how delighted I am to be back on this side of 6th Avenue. And back where I belong. I think there was some show like that. 25 years ago, things have changed a lot. At that time, everyone was talking about Dreamgirls and what a big hit it was going to be. So here we are in 2006, and everyone's talking about Dreamgirls and what a big hit it's going to be. I think 25 years ago, I was doing this little show from the other side of the pond called Nicholas Nickleby. And how much things have changed. This year I'm doing this little show from across the pond called Costa Utopia. 2 different theaters, though. And we had a group of actors who were phenomenal, and many, in fact, most of them had not been to the United States. And they were fascinated about American actors and how they worked and the American theater and how it worked. And there was a moment during during the half-hour period before curtain when many of the actors went out into the audience and roamed through the audience, and it was all a lead up to the beginning of the show. And during that period, business cards were exchanged and sheets of paper were exchanged with phone numbers, all business-oriented, I was told. But there were 3 people backstage working with Sally Jacobs and I who were the English stage managers on the show. And we were busy, and we saw a lot of each other every day. We saw each other for 14 hours every day. So on the odd day off, we didn't see much of each other, and they wanted to go off and see New York. And while I was getting a lot of calls for house seats for the show and questions about Roger Rees and other members of the company, it was the stage managers came and did their job and left, and not much attention was paid, except for one person who was constantly saying, "How are the English stage managers? What do they think about this?" Jane, having just a little interest in all things British, was the one person who really wanted to know how were these people, adjusting to working in America and working on Broadway and our way of working. And at one point she suggested, why don't we get together and have a drink with them one night? And I'm sure, a few other stage managers would like to join us and, talk to them. And so Sally and I suggested it to them, and they were more than delighted to sit down with us. And, we made a few phone calls, and we found a few people who, would love to come and sit and have a few beers with 3 Brits and exchange some conversation. And a lot of the conversation was about theater. A lot of the conversation was about London. A lot of the conversation was about New York. What should they see while they're here? What should we do when we go to England? I think the thing that surprised me most out of the evening was there were a number of faces there whose names I knew, but I had never met them. And we were working in the same profession in the same area. And, in the conversation, we found out, a lot of the things that I was curious about, they were curious about. Things that concerned me were things they were concerned about. Problems I was having were problems they were having. There were many times when something would happen on a show and I'd go, oh, what would Martin Hertzer do now? I'd say, he'd tell them to all go to hell and he'd do it his way, But I thought I was the only one having that problem. There were times I would, oh God, I wished, I could, go down and talk to Bill Dudds, who was just down the street from us, about a problem we were having. I thought I was alone. And what happened that night is I found out I wasn't quite that alone. And that drink night, I think we had a couple more with the Brits while they were here. They left. And I and Jane, I was thinking, this was great. And the folks who had come along with this were saying, this is great to get to know each other. These were names I'd known for a long time, faces I had occasionally seen coming and going on 44th and 45th Street, but didn't really know. And so drink night came about. And at that point, I think we were beginning to get a group of founding members of what would eventually become the SMA. And Jane, do you want to share some of your reminiscence?
You like that as a cue, Tony?
I was told I had to get founding members in there someplace. Actually, I don't know if any of you saw the email or if it even went to any of you, but we got an email that called us the Germinators of the SMA. I figured Germinators, Tony wouldn't get a cue. I wouldn't get a slide up there for.
It was fun emailing back. So Germinator 1, what do you think we should do? Sign Germinator 2. I think the easiest way to talk about the start of the SMA is basically 4 sentences. Let's a few of us meet and have a drink after our shows. Of course, boy, did you get down late.
Oh,
Thank you for staying, Alan, that first night. 'Cause, boy. Oh, all right. I'm not starting again. Number 2. So that's what you look like. 3, already addressed. Really? You have that problem too? 4, hey, this was great. Let's do this again and call a few other SMs. From little things, great things grow.
Yes. I think the thing that's most amazing, and we were reminiscing about this last night, we started drink night with a couple of Brits who we had just met.
Yes.
Oh,
Who drank like fishes.
I've heard that Brits do that. I don't know that these Brits did that. The PSM was quite something. But we started with a group of a few of us who, again, as I say, I had the chance to meet for the first time, for several of them. And what has happened because of all of you is we can go virtually anywhere in the United States now, and we already have a base, a friendship base, a professional base. We're out on tour. You can find someone from the SMA anywhere. And I think that's something that we can all be very, very proud of. And I congratulate all of us. Thank you.
This is the trio. They promised they would flank me and hold me up. So that's what they're doing. I'm Janet Friedman. This is Bill McComb, and this is Peter Taylor.
Hello.
Thank you. I was the first unofficial secretary before I was the first official secretary. It took us a number of meetings before we got around to electing officers, but from the third meeting on, I started taking notes and writing them up as newsletters. And those newsletters were typewritten on my typewriter. Every word was typewritten. So, and those newsletters were co-written by usually a core group of us, including Barry Moss and Peter and Bill and Jane, and I'm sure I'm forgetting people. Barry Kersley, my husband. And we would fight over every single word. We would fight over every single comma, every single semicolon. And the reason was because we knew that we were sending this out to people who hadn't been at the meeting. And we wanted to make sure that we got across the meaning that the person who was speaking intended. And so we fought over it a lot, but we got it done. And we had mailing parties, which was even more fun, because we got, a lot of you remember mailing parties at my house and Allison Summers' house. She had mailing parties, and Barry Moss had mailing parties. And we would fold and stuff and stamp, and stamping involved actually licking the stamps. There were no self-stick or sponging them. There were no self-stick stamps back then.
But there were 200 members, 200 newsletters,
yeah.
200 stamps.
Yes, exactly.
200 staples.
200 staples, exactly. So that's what we did, and we were able to communicate with a growing number of members. We also, Barry and I ran the organization out of our apartment for the first 2.5 years. It was our address, it was our phone number, it was our doorman. Our postman, who we had to tip quite heavily from time to time for all the mail that was coming in. So, and we were proud to do it, and took great pleasure in doing it. And I'm proud to have been a founding member. So. The answering machine in the closet. That's right. When we finally got rid, thank you, Marjorie. When we finally got rid of using our phone, we got another phone line installed in our apartment, and we attached an answering machine to it, and it was in my closet. And we would hear little clicks and whirs whenever anybody called, but at least there was no phone ringing. So that was part of the battle anyway. So thank you, Marjorie. I forgot that. Peter, Bill?
Bill, thank you. Out of the newsletter, and believe me, she typed every letter, every word, every punctuation mark, Janet. Out of the newsletter, after a while, and we'll admit we're a little confused about exactly when,
We're all getting older.
a little thing called the headset was created. They remember.
They're just being polite.
Oh, all right. Yeah, we're old now, that's right. I was trying to think on the way in today, what was the inspiration for the headset?
They remember.
But I was more profound than that, thank you very much. Crossing the Tappan Zee Bridge, it dawned on me the headset was, in a way, a variation perhaps of Drink Night. Mm-hmm. The newsletter was a reporting document. They said this at the meeting. Transcriptions of the couple of forums that we had, which ran to 8, 10, 12 pages sometimes, single-space typewrite. But we would sit at Janet's house, and maybe somebody from some city far-flung across the country had sent in a letter. Or we had some good gossip, you're right. There was no place for that kind of stuff, we felt, in the newsletter. Where can we put it? Peter and I went off our separate ways, and Peter had a newfangled thing called a computer. I'm not joking. You're the first person I ever knew who owned a computer. And Peter would write. He would transcribe things that people sent to us, because he's the more brilliant. I would sit at home on my bed with a piece of plywood on my lap, and I literally cut and paste the first dozen or 2 dozen issues of the headset. And those of you in the computer age, cut and paste actually refers to
How many of you have a glue stick at home? You're showing your age.
The ones we were using were that old. Literally every issue of the headset, I was so proud of them when they appeared in your mailboxes. Black and white, okay, but you might not have realized some of the originals of those headsets, they look like topographical maps. They were 7 layers thick, some of them, because I had to do this and I would call up Peter at 9 o'clock at night and say, Peter, I need another and. Because it had to be in his font, you know. And we lived 10 blocks away from each other. We'd meet at the Xerox shop in between, and he'd exchange, and we created a little puppy. I think it had some really wonderful elements in it, if I may brag a little bit. Our columns were things like tools of the trade. We had grander hopes for tools of the trade than ever really materialized. We were desperate for contributions. This wasn't the era of emailing. You really had to write us a letter and lick the stamp and mail it to us, and that didn't happen too often. I remember writing an exquisite article for Tools of the Trade all about erasers and how they were essential to and various other letters from correspondents abroad, which meant Pittsburgh and Philly and Denver and things like that, and a wonderful column that ran in every headset called Clarence's Clipboard.
Yeah.
Clarence is out of the closet. Peter was Clarence. I hope I'm not.
And you see, Bill had a sense of humor, but I had to pretend to be somebody else to have a sense of humor, so I was Clarence. Really, all I want to say is that I've been out of the business for 20 years, and it's extraordinary to see these people and these faces and these names, and everybody looks exactly the same, which I do not understand. It must be something about working in the theater. But Malcolm said to us, as we were trying to figure out what we were going to say in 5 minutes, right?
And failed.
He said that there was a column called Compendium of Knowledge. None of the three of us can remember it. But he cut that out and distributed it to classes of stage managers he taught for 5 years. And I think that what I'm aware of is that we had no idea what we were doing at the time. We were just doing what we were doing. And it meant something. And I assume that that's still the case for everything that each of you is doing and what I'm doing. And so that's what this evening means to me.
Great.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jay Adler. I'm here to talk to you about a little bit about the early meetings, the Constitution, and so forth. As I recall it, the founders of the SMA had considerable differences of opinion as to exactly what it was they were founding. In the early meetings, 2 factions emerged. One, led by some of the senior stage managers, thought it should continue out of drinks night and be somewhat of an informal organization, a kind of a drinks club. And this was manifested when the discussion, and you have to picture now a room full of 2 or 3 dozen stage managers, uncharacteristically speaking passionately about what they felt. The name was, some people proposed from that group, Stage Managers Drink Night for the organization. Some people said, well, let's just call it a bunch of stage managers. And somebody else said, well, why do we even need a name? You know, let's just get together and we'll have a drink and exchange ideas. The other faction wanted a more formal kind of organization and wanted a constitution. And the more extreme members of that group actually had some issues with actors' equity and were thinking about, well, maybe stage managers might be represented somewhere else other than actors' equity, because actually musical directors are making more than we are, and the head of the stagehand is making more than I'm the company manager. Why aren't we getting more? Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, this went on and on and on in discussions for a couple of weeks. And then it was decided that somehow, couple of months, it was decided that some sort of formal system of figuring out what the organization should be need to be adopted. And so the group turned to Robert's Rules of Order. And if you have the little brown book, which some of you have seen, I had some familiarity with that in previous organizations and became the parliamentarian. And so for a few meetings, we tried mightily to learn about secondary motions and points of personal privilege and one thing or another. And it became clear after a while that those who had sort of studied the book had a kind of political advantage over those who had not. And a simplified version of Robert's Rules was adopted, at which point things began to move forward in some organized fashion, and issues like what kind of leadership structure should there be in a constitution, what the name of the organization once again came up, and of course this whole idea of should stage managers be represented in equity and sort of thing. And there was this committee formed to study that whole issue that went off, looked around at the various other options and came back and said, no, we belong here. So that is the history of Robert's Rules. As far as the organization is concerned, the Constitution eventually got written and amended, and out of this discussion about actors' equity, which it sounds a little negative now when I'm telling you, but it really was a kind of a positive exploration process that needed to be done and gone through. Some ancillary benefits devolved to stage managers. And here to tell you about that is a man who needs no introduction. I'm going to introduce him. Production stage manager and the man who wrote the book many of you studied when you were a stage management student, Mr. Tom Kelly.
I'd just like to start by thanking John for talking about Patrick. It would be impossible to talk about our getting council seats without acknowledging the incredible help he was to all of us. He understood, he supported us. He was a great friend, he was a great person to have in a company, which I had the joy of doing several times. But once upon a time, a long, long, long time ago, there were no stage managers, and all was chaos. But it came to pass that someone, perhaps William Shakespeare, noticed the chaos in his company and created such a role. For Peter Quince in Midsummer is no doubt the first recorded stage manager asking, "Are we all met? And this will be our stage, and this will be our green room." And so for centuries, stage managers went on being the jovial fellows in the old movies with clipboards and stopwatches, always having a sympathetic ear for the mixed-up chorus girl who would later become a star and completely forget us. But finally, there came a time when all who stage managed, as you have already heard, came together in a bar named for a thespian, Barrymore. For there were no bars named after stage managers. And thence, as Jay has mentioned, a cry went up. Are we not to be recognized after all these years as an actual profession? Will our contracts always say actor? Who is responsible for this? Grumbling was heard, and many silently cursed the guild which we had joined. actors' equity. But there were those among us who dared to speak up and said, let us have our own union, and we shall make great strides and be able to have equal pay for equal work. We'll be able to have stage managers as assistants instead of retired dancers or actors who can cover a minimum of 5 roles. So lawyers were summoned, and leaders of the directors' union, the stagehands' union, were approached. But they said, nay, nay. For you would do our work in props and take jobs from us. And the directors already felt we had trampled on their territory by putting in replacements, rehearsing understudies, doing national companies. And so none of them wanted us. Was heard amongst the weary band of stage managers gathering in bars and restaurants across the theatrical district. But once again they joined hands, and Stage Managers Association took its infant steps. They gained recognition with the formulation of an entity that followed Robert's rules and had a constitution. Said Actors' Equity. I think perhaps we'd best reach out to this group. For we cannot afford to lose them. They do so much of our paperwork, the insurance forms, the cards. And surely when we add the 2% weekly salary deduction as dues, they will be a large contributor. And so a dialogue began. But it was initially trepidatious and ornery at best, for the radical SMAers did not want to still be part of the Actors' Union and let others do their negotiating and setting of limits on their work and time. They would speak for themselves, damn it! But who would listen? Ask the wiser and wizened, some of whom are here this evening. Once you are not part of the Actors' Union, who will listen to your plaints? Who will listen to your demands? And more importantly, who among you will not work for substandard wages as you climb the ladder to being a full stage manager? For a union protects not only its members against management, but against each other. Damn, they said, then our only lot will be to try to have a louder voice. I know, said a voice. Let us gain seats on council, where all decisions equitable and just are made. And cheers went up through the SMA, but crusty old, embittered equity council members said, we need them not. They have sat at the table with management, and therefore they stinketh. Not so, we cried. We want to fight inequities as much as you. We want to fight for safety and proper rehearsals for replacements and fight rehearsals and 100 other things we can help you gain, if you will but let us join you. But it is unconstitutional, cried the crusty counselors. We are a union of actors and allow you but the crumbs from our negotiating table. That is how the founders wanted it, and that is how it shall be. What matters a constitution, we cried. We will amend it. And if you read the wonderful handout given today, you will learn all about that amendment, its exact words, etc. A call went out to all the backstages of all the theaters in the city, and stage managers and performers and dancers and singers came in numbers beyond all comprehension to a temple called Booth on the fringes of the Schubertian Empire. And the council gathered on stage, and a worried look crossed their brows. They had never seen such numbers at a meeting. Indeed, many of them could not remember having seen that many members of Actors Equity in all the meetings ever. And there were dramatic and wonderful and colorful speeches. Stars spoke about us, dancers spoke about us. We discovered that, unbeknownst to us, we really were loved. And it was an amazing moment, because for all of us who did for a long time think nobody cared, we heard people get up and say how much they appreciated us, and that we should have a voice in council, and we should be recognized. And it was remarkable. Anyone who was there that day, I'm sure, remembers it as clearly as I do. And so for years, we've stood up on the floor of council meetings. We've made ours and your voice heard. And we had sometimes lonely voices. At first, when we tried to work with instead of against the notions of proper rehearsals, proper discipline and attendance at rehearsal and performance, maintenance of quality, safety issues, many people argued the other way. They didn't want to come to rehearsals. They didn't want to show up for performances. But the stage managers helped create the world in which they do come now. We even defeated the Schubert's objections to stopping the rain of asbestos that used to fall on our calling scores as the curtain went up and down against the old fire curtains. I remember a real silence at a negotiating session when Bernie Jacobs asked, "Do you have any idea what replacing all those curtains will cost us?" Needless to say, the silence was the same as you now hear. My privilege of being the first Equity Stage Manager Council member, followed shortly by Alan Hall and Frank Hartenstein, something I truly cherish. It was so liberating to finally be able to say what we collectively believe and feel as stage managers, and begin the process of beginning the improvements in the ability to do our jobs and the recognition of what that job was, and perhaps more importantly, was not. No longer were off-Broadway stage managers running for food, running lights and sound while trying to watch and maintain a show's integrity. No longer were we going to be forced into shoving people into the middle of huge musicals, revolving scenery, light changes, etc., with only stage work light rehearsals. Often in the first year, I was the only yay or nay vote in a council voting, although often and joyously I was joined by Bernie Pollack, who was really the first stage manager council, although because the constitutional amendment had not been passed, he was on council as a principal, but he spoke loud and clearly for stage management. And I firmly believe that without the organizing of the SMA, we would never have gained seats, never given you a voice in your union. I'm proud to have been a part of that early struggle, and I hope you appreciate it and continue to grow as a positive force for stage managers. My friend and mentor, Bob Curry, always said, all things are not of equal importance. Well, the SMA and the art of stage managing is and will be as important as you, its working members, continue to make it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. In quoting Shakespeare, Tom has reminded me that indeed all the world is a stage, and we merely are the players. But more than just players, we have led from the wings with many a fellow stage manager. In some fashion or another, these stage managers have transformed us. Their images provoke a journey into our own souls. There we find a gate, a portal to our own transformation. We go on, we shall go on. We are the continuum. We are linked by time. And we do it on cue. However, in the fullness of time where the deceased live, we are all gathered to remember our past and celebrate our future. I look forward to the point in time we can all bend elbows again at some heavenly watering holes that live on in memory. Ted Hook's Backstage, La Grillade, Great Aunt Fanny's, The Silver Lining, JR's, Jimmy Ray's, Downey's, Barrymore's, McHale's, and join there with the likes of Joel, Martin, Barry, Bob, Morty, Lucia, Ruth, CB, Casey, Tori, and many, many other stage managers. I ask all of you to raise a glass and toast to thank our forebearers. Thank you. Here's to you all. At this moment, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of Actors Equity, Alan Eisenberg.
So thank you. I think I'm the surprise guest for the night because I actually asked John if I could speak because there were so many memories that started bouncing about and reverberating when I heard everybody speaking. I started work on October 5, 1981, and the day before, October 4, I saw the all-day production of Nicholas Nickleby, which was quite a startling way to begin. all those English actors and everything. And at intermission, I went over to Sardi's with everybody else. We trooped upstairs, and one of the first persons I was introduced to was Liz McCann, and she looked at me and she said, "He doesn't look so tough." And then the first year I was there, Dreamgirls had opened on Broadway, and I emotionally linked in very early in the game with Bernie Jacobs and with Michael Bennett. And I remember going over to Bernie's office very early and saying, I remember when the show, when I went down the aisle of Nicholas Nickleby, I said, "Mr. Jacobs," and I got this hawk-eye look at him. And but I remember that I completed one negotiation with him, and the council, the committee said, "Well, we want you to get this, we want you to get that you didn't get." So I went over to his office and I said, "Well, here's what happened, and we'd like you to reconsider this." And I said, "And I want to make it clear that you did not give it to me." And the minute I said that, he said, "You got it." And that began a period of complete trust and exchange of needs to the benefit of the membership more than anybody else that went on until his untimely death, which is now 10 years ago. So I it was my first year. I was a labor lawyer by background. That was my, as I said earlier, it was my third career. My first career was that I was the second best espresso operator in New York City. And why was I only the second best? Because the guy who taught me was the first best. And then I was a labor lawyer, and then I got this job at Equity. And so I understood the politics of an organization, but I didn't know the particular issues of the industry, though I knew the literature reasonably well, and I grew up in Brooklyn, and I used to sit in the second balcony, and I thought that was really nice, and it was. And so I started working late, which I continued to do, I guess, for most of my career. And I'd work until about 9 o'clock at night. I knew Michael through Bernie, and we got very close. We negotiated some workshop agreements, and as I said, I was one of Bernie's, I didn't say this, but I was one of Bernie's 3 or 4 or 5 adopted sons. And as I said at his memorial, he was both my friend and my father. And so I'd go over to the Imperial, and I would see and I'd work till about 5 minutes of 9, and I'd go over to the Imperial. I would see Michael Haggard wandering through the theater, and I would hear Jennifer bring down Act 1 with that song, and they always applauded too soon. It was always there was always another 8 or 10 bars, and then I'd go home. So that was how I began my career. So here's a story that happened at Cy Feuer's memorial last week, which I mentioned to a few people. Cy told, and I'm telling this because it's just so wonderful to be part of this all. Cy told the writer that she had to cut a scene, and she said, "I'm not going to cut a scene. Under the Dramatists Guild contract, I don't have to cut the scene." And Cy said, "I'm going to cut the scene." So she turned around, went out into the street, found a cop, brought the cop back, and said, "Arrest him, he's breaching my Dramatists Guild contract." So that's what we're all about. So there was a lot of talk about Patrick and his contribution and everything. So actually I wore a suit for 2 reasons tonight, because one, I've allowed my dress to totally disintegrate over the course of the last couple of years, which makes me more important, I suppose. And I wanted to show my respect to you, and I also wanted to show my respect to Patrick. So in my first, and I had something to do with that first Best of the Best. Marty Siegel who was chairman of the board of Lincoln Center, had been my mentor. Actually, it was he who told me about the job. Because I was working in Washington, and I called him. I hardly knew him, but I screwed up my courage, and I called him, and he said, "Well, I know about this job at Actors Equity. Hear the good things about the job, and hear about the bad things about the job." They were about even, I think. But he sent me off to the search committee, and I was able to get the job. So in my first negotiation, which was 1983, which not for the stage managers in this group, but for the actors, I was able to get the eighths back that had been lost in the 1980 negotiation, because Bernie wanted to make a trade that all the parts equaled one role in Little Me, and I said, okay, well, we'll do that, and we'll waive all the arbitrations we have, but I want the eighths back. And he made that trade. And in that first negotiation, we were trying to get, I think, a $10 increment for dance captains, which we didn't have anything. And a man named John Ganser went around to all the dance. He was on the committee. He was an actor. He shortly died of AIDS. And he went around to all the dance captains, all on Broadway, and he came back with reports of what they did. And at the end of it, we got $10 worth of increments for the dance captains. So that was all because of John Ganser. And a related story about AIDS, which came from that period of time, is one of the first people I knew, I think it was earlier than John. I met him for a drink at the Oak Bar at the Plaza, and he said he was dying of AIDS, and he was going back to his hometown in some little town in the South. And a couple, 3, 4, 5 years later, I was accompanying Colleen Dewhurst. We had gone to some place, the great Colleen Dewhurst, and we went up to the airplane ticket person, and I said, "Well, Miss Dewhurst is going somewhere," and so we were in this really little town, and he looked up and he said, "Miss Dewhurst," and he just acted effusively about how he knew her, and it turned out he was the brother of Barry, who had gone home to die at his little town in the South somewhere. So then the Stage Managers Association got formed, and I said, "Oh, another fucking another group I got to worry about." And Jay has spoken about it, and Robert and the like. But what it came about really was, in a way, was we lost the arbitration in mass appeal. Milo O'Shea, we'll never forget Milo O'Shea. And so it transferred from Manhattan Theater Club on East 77th Street, East 73rd, thank you, where I had seen, as I mentioned to Lauren Schneider, where I had seen Holly Hunter do Miss Firecrackers contest one Saturday afternoon. That war horse of the Lord world, where it should stay, the war horse of the Lord world. And so we lost the arbitration that said that actors did not, when it transferred to Broadway, that stage managers were not covered. So that started all the stuff that Tom has talked about and other people have talked about. And it was wonderful to hear him speak about how we really embraced the stage managers in terms of the seats on the council, and Bernie Pollack was a very instrumental factor in the beginning. And I was in Berlin a week or two ago with Patrick and Mark Zimmerman, and we were attending some international performing arts organization. And Ira Mont was with us, and I just watched how organized he was, and how his papers were all in 3 whole things, and it was all tabbed, and he knew where everything was. And he was with his wife, who was also a stage manager. I said, "How did the two of you get along?" But it said a lot about how organized he was, and he's a wonderful representative. And ever since Mass Appeal, you've had your place on the council, and it's been very well respected. And maybe I was worried about what the Stage Managers Association has been, but I've come with some regularity. I've been invited with great courtesy and attention to the meetings that I've been coming. I've been backstage quite a bit, and I've sat in the booth a number of times, and I really don't think we could do any of this theater without you. And I think you're wildly overworked and wildly underpaid, and I hope everybody deeply appreciates all that you do, because it's just awesome. So thank you.
So this is really the end. I'm just wrapping things up now. But before we break up, I just want to make sure, take a moment to thank the people who actually made this evening happen. Cheryl Mintz, between arranged for everything that you're eating and sitting in and drinking between her cues down at the McCarter Theater. So we greatly appreciate that, and her family. Aaron Joy Swank, who's not with us today, but lets you all know about it. Let you know what was going on, and kept sending you more and more emails, because I kept getting them. And Tony Melchior, who presented this, who got all the equipment and put this together. And John Goldman, who I think is teching a nymph project tonight and couldn't be here, made the slides and made this all, so we didn't have to keep make reading names off. And most importantly, to our three co-chairs for this tonight, Robert Cohen, Marjorie Horn, and Rich Costable, who made this wonderful. Over the past 25 years, there have actually been 15 chairs and 27 vice chairs, and numerous board members who have worked tirelessly to develop the SMA from what we heard tonight to a national organization. And over the past 25 years, we've developed some projects, one of them which is the Dell Hughes Award, which is presented to a person who has excelled and demonstrated incredible professionalism and determination in this industry as a stage manager, and the 10 awardees so far have put the bar very high for future awardees. It's just an honor to even be able to say these names or read these names next to me. See, because it's on a slide, I don't have to read the names. You can read it. We also have the Casey Mell Award, which is presented to a young stage manager just getting started, and the Barry Kersley Award, scholarship who goes to a deserving student at Hofstra University. Bo Metzler developed this thing called Operation Observation, which has helped stage managers just hang out and watch other people work, which is always encouraging, because as we heard before, it's like, oh my God, they go through that too. I thought I was the only one. Sandy Bowl oversaw our table at the flea market yesterday, and through all the rain and stuff, she stayed. And our table yesterday made $3,900 for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. I was teaching a class a couple of years ago, and we've referred to it, this thing called typewriters. And we were at a question and answer period, and someone raised their hand and asked me, what was it like to be a stage manager before computers? I didn't really answer, I just moved on. No, what I actually did is I held up a pencil and an eraser, and I just pointed at the eraser. But with the computer, the Stage Manager Association is diving fast forward into the 21st century, and we are definitely becoming a more national organization. We have drink nights. We've sponsored drink nights in all across the country. I've attended drink nights in Philadelphia, in Milwaukee. I just missed one in Tempe. They were having it the day after I left town, but I just missed one there. And in fact, I believe tonight there are organizations, SMA members in Philadelphia, Phoenix, Tempe, and Chicago meeting tonight, celebrating with us. So hopefully, for the 30th anniversary, we can have a tie-in and we can all be watching each other and do that. But we'll have our own satellite dish by then, I guess. But we also, with the computer and with the internet, we have expanded. And Erin Joy, our secretary, one of our secretaries, is in Colorado. Marguerite Price is from Philadelphia, and we've had members of the board in Tempe and Phoenix and all across the country. So we truly are growing into a national organization, and that will only grow further. So that's it. I just want to say thank you all for coming and helping to celebrate 25 years of the Stage Managers Association. Thank you.